This video is our second video of chapter 2. In this one in particular, we're going to be talking about input and output into the system. So allowing the user to type things in the keyboard that we can use, and then also allowing us to display messages and other information onto the screen. Okay. So since it's still new to us, I've gone ahead and I've just opened up Warp. So I'm going to SSH into it. Again, if you're on a Windows computer, you could be using PuTTY. You could also use a terminal from the Mac, the same thing. This is SSH my username at ludwig.mcs.uvays.edu. Okay. Once I've done that, remember the first time it's going to ask you that fingerprint stuff, and you have to say yes. Now, once the second time and further, we don't have to type in our password, which again, it does not show us as it's typing it in, but it'll let us know if something's wrong. Okay. Again, the message is here. We don't have to worry about, but we do have to do a CD into our CSC 1180 directory. Okay. And a PWD again shows that we're there. And also, if you look at the screen, you'll see in pink here, at least on my terminal, the tilde, which means our home directory slash CSC 1180. Okay. So for this input output, we're also going to start with a little bit of review from the last video. So I'm going to create a file. We'll call it something, I don't know, in out maybe, capital O, in out.cpp. Okay. So again, we could be using our template if you want. We can also do this by ourselves. So it's include IO stream. That's going to allow us to do the input and output. Okay, we do a using namespace standard, std for standard, dr int main, dr return 0. That ends that. That ends our main. Okay. So now we can go through the steps here. So first, we're going to declare some variables of different types. Okay. You have an integer, let's say, called n, which set its value equal to 123. We can have a double, call that d is equal to 2.345, always with a semicolon. Okay. We could have a char, let's call that c, is equal to single quote to a capital A for whatever reason. Okay. Then we could do a bool, b is equal to true. Okay. And then finally, we could do a string. Let's say name is equal to Bob in double quotes, semicolon. Okay. So that's kind of what we had done before with declaring the variables. We didn't actually do that in a program. So now let's look at, we're going to output our information. Okay. So again, C++ uses what we call stream operators. And I said in class, we put things on the stream and they flow to wherever they're headed. Okay. So in this case, we're going to have things flow to cout, which is a standard output, which for our system is the screen. Okay. So if I use the command cout, I use the two less than signs because I want to put things on the stream in the stream that are going to end up on the screen. Okay. So if I were to put here name, whatever, and then an indel is a new line character. Okay. If I do that and run this program, again, Control X, Control C, we'll exit, hit Y to save it. I can then do a G++ in out.exe, but I forgot you got to do the dash O in out.exe space in out.cpp. It runs it. It didn't give me an error, so it must be okay. Then I can do a dot slash in out.exe, and you see that prints the name to the screen. Okay. So let's go back into our code, hit the up arrow to get back to it, and let's print out some of our variables. So let's just change this text here to our variables. Okay. Then I'm going to cout n. That's the first variable we have. Want an indel for that as well. Okay. I can see out. I won't do them all. Let's do a D. Okay. I can see out. Let's do a name. Okay. I'm just going to print those on the screen. So I'm going to compile it again. Going to run it again. And there you go. Prints it all out. Okay. So keep in mind that if we didn't put the end line, we could put two things, right in a row like this if you wanted. Okay. So this is going to print the 1, 2, 3. Then it's immediately going to print the 2.345 after that. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Okay, that's probably not what we want. Makes the number look incorrect. Okay. So we do have some options there on the print. And as we go along, we'll do examples with more things that we can do. But in this case, we could put, let's say we want to put a tab character in between. Okay. So I could just do some spaces, actually, if we want to do that. So when I put spaces, that string is going to literally be put onto the output line. Okay. So now there's some spaces there, which is fine. But when you want to line things up, we can also do a tab. So the tab character in single quotes is a \T. Okay. And the \T, even though it's a backslash and a T, it represents one character, the tab character. Okay. And there's some other special characters we could be doing. Okay. So that does the tab there. Okay. So other things that we could do here for the name, we could do something like on the same line, say, my name is, okay, like that. But unlike Python, Python would automatically put a space in there. C++ does not. So if I do this as it is, what am I doing? I don't know. That's not what I want. Escape, escape. Escape gets you out of stuff. Control, I think I did Control X, Control V. There we go. Okay, now when we run it, we've got no space there. So you need to put one in physically. So we'll go back into our code, put a space right there. Okay. If you wanted, you could put a \T there as well. Okay. And that'll put a tab character, which may be overkill. Okay. See, that looks a little unnatural, but you can do it. Okay, so we can get rid of that. If for some crazy reason you wanted is to be on a new line, we could do that /end there. Then when I run that, you see that it breaks to the new line, but didn't put a space there. Okay. Which is probably not what we want. So going back to being more reasonable here, we'll get rid of the new line character, but we'll put a space there. Remember, every time you make a change to your program, so we're doing three things, right? We're going to edit the file, compile the file, run the file. We go back to edit the file. We then have to run it or to compile it again before we run it, or things won't change. Okay, so I compiled, and now I can run it, but I've lost. There we go. Now we run it, and now that looks okay. Okay, so that's the output. We'll do some more tricks as we go along the way, but those are the basic ideas. Okay, so now let's look at some input that we can do. Okay, so I'll just leave that there for now. And I'm going to put a comment in here. We're going to input some information. Okay. We do this with the CN. So the CN is the standard input, okay, which for us is the keyboard, okay? But note this is a standard input buffer, which means it's going to take more than one thing if we want it to, okay? So let's do a simple example, okay? We've got our int n. Let's say we want to ask the user for a new value of n, okay? So let's say we're not going to set a default value here because we know we're going to ask the user for it, okay? So I'm just going to ask that there, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and print, get rid of this for now, just so we can focus on the input. Okay. So now that I have an n that doesn't have a value, but it wouldn't matter if I did, it would just override it. I could do the cn, but this time the arrows go that way because we're going from the keyboard to the variable. Okay. And I can do that, but when I run it, it's going to be hard for the user, and it's waiting for it now, but it didn't tell me that. Okay. So I need to prompt it. So this is what we normally do to prompt. We're going to have a C out, CN C out combo. So I'm going to C out. Okay. Again, the arrows go that way. I'm going to say enter a number. I like to put a colon there and a space. Okay. But not a new line. Okay. Because I want it to be lined up. Okay. It's then going to enter the CN on the end. I can then see out what I have. I can then see out. You entered space, put that on the stream. Then I'm going to put the value of n on the stream. Then I'm putting an inline character there. Okay. Compile it. Gonna run it. Now it gives us a prompt here. Enter a number. Enter 45. It's going to print out that I entered a 45. Okay. So, I mean, that should be good stuff, right? That should make some sense. So we usually do this combination of CNs and COuts. Um, I will say though, at this point, we don't know how to check to make sure they're actually entering in proper values. You notice in my previous example, before I had a prompt, I entered an F for an N, which is not valid for an integer to have an F. Okay. But we're not doing any error checking. So when you don't do error checking, which we can't do until we get control structures, you get some unpredictable results. Okay. So it could enter that F, it could turn it into a zero, it could turn it into lots of things. Okay. So the other thing we can do with our CN, again, because it's a buffer, we can get multiple values at the same time. Okay, so let's take a look at what that would look like. So let's say instead of this, let's say we have ages. Again, home keys are your friend. Age 1, age 2, age 3, and age 4. Okay, I'm declaring all those integers in that line. I'm not giving them values. Truth be told, they're probably zeros, but we don't know that for sure. Okay. So now I can say, I can't enter the n anymore because it's not there anymore. I could say enter 4 ages separated by a space. Okay. And then I could do the CN for age 1. That will get the first number and move the pointer in the buffer forward. I can then do a CN on age 2, a CN on age 3, and a CN on age 4. Okay. And then from our print statements, let's say we do a you entered it on one line, and then I could just do a C out age 1, do a tab character, the \t, age 2. See if this all fits. It may not. Note that since we're using semicolons at the end of the line, if this goes past one line, it's okay. It's still the same line. Age 3, I think will be okay. And indel at the end. Okay. So that's going to tab out the ages that we enter. Okay. So when I run this, compile it, no errors yet, which does happen. Enter 4 ages separated by space. I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see that it correctly picks 1 for age 1, 2 for age 2, 3 for age 3, and 4 for age 4. Okay. This is fairly forgiving for the user. So if they enter like a 34 and hit enter, it's just going to wait till you do 4. Okay. Now it prints those out. Okay. So most programs that we have are going to have input and output. Okay. So the big thing to remember here is to keep these arrows the correct direction. So if we don't, so let's say I did this one this way instead, when I compile it, you tend to get a mess of errors. You see, just all kinds of stuff. When you see all this, you will think, oh my gosh, I've done something awful. I've broken the computer. What am I going to do? Okay. So when you see this, it's going to tell you at the very beginning, okay, that there's an issue there, okay, and that kind of helps us out. But when you see all this stuff talking about operators and streams, you've probably got one of those the wrong direction, okay. One other thing about debugging, I don't think we've talked about before, if your program has multiple errors, which often you'll get a bunch of errors, start by fixing just the first error. One error can cause lots of other errors. Okay, so I put this back. Control X, Control C, and yes. Compile it again. Got to make sure we do that. Now when I run it, I can go back and do that, and we're correct. Okay. So those are the basics of input and output on C++ program. They're different from than we had in Python. So Python just did a simple print to print to the screen. Okay. And then we had the input or the raw input to input variables from the user. Okay. So a little bit different here, but the advantage or the payoff's going to come when we get to files, the same basic syntax we use for standard input and standard output, we can use for file input and file output. So at least it's consistent. Okay. So that's all we've got for this video. This is part 2. Then on the third video, we'll talk about doing arithmetic in C++ and how we can do numbers that will give us the correct results.